Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back into the shadowy streets of 14th century Europe where a silent killer moved faster than gossip at a family wedding. The Black Death was not just a disease, it was the midnight soundtrack of coughing neighbors, the stench of abandoned bread ovens and church bells, tolling for so many that they practically counted time itself. Imagine waking up each day, not sure if breakfast was worth it, because chances were you wouldn't live to finish dinner. Here's the reality check: you wouldn't survive a night. Between the swollen buboes, the rats with more social connections than merchants and neighbors, ready to blame you for poisoning the well, your odds make modern Monday mornings look cheerful. Before we wander further into this dark dream, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy these sleepy journeys into history. And drop your location and local time in the comments. We're building a gentle map of listeners across the world. Now, let's drift together into the Black Death dark. Chilling, unforgettable. You open your eyes to a silence that doesn't feel like morning. It feels like absence. The air in your room is heavy, a damp stillness broken only by the faint creak of wood as the beams above settle. For a moment, you lie still, wondering if the pounding in your chest is just the echo of a dream. But then you smell it, the faint sweetness of decay that seeps under the door, drifting in from the alley outside. It clings to your throat like breathing through a damp rag left too long in a corner. The church bell begins to toll, not once for a wedding, not twice for prayer, but over and over, too many times for you to count. The sound rolls across the rooftops, like waves breaking on a shore of grief. Each strike means another neighbor gone. You think of yesterday when the bell rang so often it felt less like ritual and more like background music. Imagine Spotify, but every track is called Another One Dead. You rise slowly, your joints stiff from the cold. The hearth hasn't been lit since your father took ill. Firewood is scarce anyway. Those who haul it in have either fled or collapsed in the streets. Your stomach growls, but it's a hollow protest. There might be a heel of bread left in the kitchen if the rats haven't found it first. These aren't the timid, skittering creatures of modern cartoons. These are black rats, the medieval landlords of your home, bold enough to stare at you while nibbling what used to be your dinner. And of course, they come with fleas, the kind of six-legged hitchhikers that don't just bite. They deliver death with more efficiency than any medieval postal service. Stepping outside is no comfort. The lane is eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels staged. Windows are shuttered, doors barred, and yet you sense eyes watching from behind cracks. Not the kind of curious glances neighbors give when you mow your lawn too early on a Sunday, but desperate, fearful stares, each person terrified you might carry the sickness in your breath. A cart trundles by its wooden wheels, squealing. The driver doesn't call out, doesn't sell goods. Instead, he calls for the dead. A rough cloth covers the piled shapes in the back, but not well enough. A pale arm slips free, dangling limply until the next bump pulls it back inside. The driver doesn't even look, he's seen too many already. You quickly step aside, heart pounding, as though even the dough of that cart might cling to you. Somewhere a child cries, the sound muffled, then cut off suddenly, as if someone pressed a hand to their mouth. You imagine the mother whispering frantic prayers, terrified the noise will draw unwanted attention. Because in times like these, the plague isn't the only danger. Fear makes neighbors dangerous too. Rumors of poisoned wells and curses spread faster than fleas. If someone hears your child coughing, you might find your door broken down not by sickness but by the mob. You pause near a well, staring into its dark water. The reflection of your face looks older than it should. Lines of worry trace your brow. The water seems innocent enough, but already whispers accuse Jews of slipping powders into wells, poisoning Christians. You know it isn't true. After all, the rats don't discriminate. But truth rarely survives fear. In Strasbourg, whole communities were burned alive before the plague even reached them. The thought makes your throat dry, but you don't drink. Not now. Not here. You return home quickly, passing by a churchyard. The gates hang open. The ground churned up, not with fresh graves, but with trenches, deep pits, where bodies are laid side by side like loaves of bread in a baker's oven. A gravedigger wipes sweat from his brow, his shovel clanging against a skull that rolls loose before being kicked back into place. He doesn't flinch, doesn't cross himself. There's no time for ceremony, not when dozens arrive each hour. It's macabre efficiency death on a production line. Back in your room, you sit on the edge of the bed. The light streaming through the small window is pale, as though the sun itself has grown weak. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to shake the feeling that every shadow hides a rat, every breeze carries poison. Your stomach twists again, but you ignore it. Eating can wait. Survival, you realize, is no longer about planning for years or even months. It's about making it through to nightfall. And night, with its silence and whispers, is something you're not sure you'll face with open eyes. You try to shake off the heaviness in your chest, but the air feels thick, as though the city itself is breathing its last. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows not the cheerful signal of farm mornings, but a ragged cry, as if the bird itself is tired of announcing new days that promise only more death. The sound echoes down empty lanes unanswered. Even animals seem confused. The rhythm of life has broken. The streets outside your door smell of ash and vinegar. Ash because desperate neighbors burn whatever they can, old clothes, straw, sometimes even shoes, in the hope that smoke will drive away bad air. Vinegar because every physician insists it purifies. Buckets of sour liquid are sloshed against doorways, splattered across cobbles. The scent is sharp enough to sting your eyes, but it doesn't erase the underlying odor, the sweet cloying rot of too many bodies buried too shallow. Imagine walking through a perfumery that accidentally mixed lemon fresh with corpse number 5. You step cautiously past a house with its shutters nailed shut. A red cross has been painted on the door, the paint still wet and dripping. Inside you hear nothing. No coughing, no crying, no prayers. The silence is its own confirmation. Whoever lived there has already joined the city's swelling graveyards, and yet the cross is meant as a warning: stay away contagion within. It's less medical advice, more medieval version of biohazard tape. Except here the hazard isn't just inside, it's everywhere. Further down the lane, you notice a man fumbling with his cart. It's not laden with goods, but with shovels, ropes, and rough cloth sacks. He doesn't look up when you approach. His eyes are sunken, his beard matted. You realize he's a corpse collector, one of the few who still dares to move from house to house, summoned by grieving families or terrified neighbors. Payment isn't always coin. Sometimes it's bread, sometimes just the promise of a favor, sometimes it's nothing at all. He loads the dead because if he doesn't, disease will bloom faster. Yet he doesn't look heroic. He looks broken, as though each sack he carries is another piece of his soul being dragged away. You think of how only months ago mornings in the city meant shouting vendors, clanging hammers, the gossip of washerwomen at the fountain. Now, the soundtrack is different. The rattle of carts, the groan of mourners, the ceaseless toll of bells. Even the dogs have grown bold, sniffing along doorways for scraps or worse. You catch one tugging at a bundle of cloth in an alley. When it rips free, what spills out is not food, but a hand. You look away quickly, bile rising, but the dog doesn't care. Hunger has no conscience. At the corner of the square, you pause to watch a small procession. Two men in long robes shuffle forward, faces hidden behind beaked masks stuffed with herbs. They carry rods to prod away the curious. Children call them plague doctors, though you know they are less healers and more reminders of how hopeless things have become. Their leather gloves gleam darkly, their cloaks waxed against infection, but their movements are hesitant, uncertain. You imagine them sweating beneath the masks, suffocating on their own fear. Their presence is meant to inspire safety, but instead it feels like death itself has grown legs and started doing house calls. Think of it like today's hazmat suit, but instead of science, it's basically aromatherapy with extra steps. You slip away before the procession reaches you. The cobbles beneath your boots are slick, though not with rain. Someone has spilled a bucket of something water mixed with herbs maybe, and the liquid runs crimson down the street. For a moment, you freeze your mind racing. Is it medicine? Is it blood in these days? The two look disturbingly similar. You remind yourself of Gentile de Foligno, a physician who insisted patients eat lettuce and rub themselves with lily roots mixed with dried human excrement. Spoiler, he died of the plague too. If that's the best medical science can offer, maybe crimson puddles are safer left unexplored. Your steps take you toward the market square, though calling it a market now feels dishonest. The stalls stand abandoned awnings flapping in the morning breeze. A loaf of bread lies hardened to stone, untouched for days. A barrel of apples has turned soft and sour, the skin splitting to reveal brown flesh crawling with flies. The buzz fills your ears like tiny whispers repeating the same message. No one is left to care. You picture yesterday's Florence bustling with 100,000 souls. Today, half of them gone. A 20% death rate in 3 months statistics. Future historians might calculate. But for you, it's just faces missing from doorways, laughter stolen from streets. You lean against a pillar and breathe deeply. The air tastes metallic, tinged with smoke. Your throat tightens, and you cough once. It's just a tickle, you tell yourself, just the dust. But in a world like this, every cough is a loaded dice. Neighbors will hear whisper and step farther away. You clutch your cloak tighter, silently, bargaining with your body not to betray you. You've seen too many who began with just a cough, only to end in a pit by week's end. Somewhere music rises faintly, not joyful songs, but a dirge, a small group of clerics chanting as they carry a cross through the streets. The sound vibrates through the air, solemn and unrelenting. You wonder how many of them will still be alive tomorrow to sing again. Religion is everywhere, but so is doubt. For every voice raised in prayer, another curses God for abandoning them. And you standing in the half light of morning, feel the tension pulling both ways. Faith promises comfort, but the evidence lies rotting in trenches. You return home slowly, feet dragging, as though each step costs more than you can pay. Inside the walls, feel closer, the ceiling lower. You light a candle, though it hardly pushes back the gloom. Its waxy scent is cloying, but you prefer it to the air outside. You sit on the stool by the hearth, staring into the small flame, trying to convince yourself it is warmth. The fire dances alive in a way so much else is not. For a brief moment, you pretend this is an ordinary morning, that bread will rise, neighbors will laugh, children will play, but outside the bells toll again, cutting through the illusion. Another soul gone, another reminder that each day begins already drowning in loss. And so you sit in a city that no longer feels like yours, waiting for a morning that might never come again. Time crawls differently now. Morning no longer feels like a beginning, but a countdown. You lean against the wall, tracing the cracks in the plaster with tired eyes. Each fissure feels like a mirror of the city outside structures, buckling surfaces, splitting the fragile sense of order, collapsing under invisible weight. Through the narrow window, you watch a group of men moving down the street with hurried steps. Their shoulders are hunched, their faces covered with cloths soaked in vinegar. One carries a small barrel, another drags a bundle. You know, without looking too closely, what the bundle is: another body wrapped in sheets, tied clumsily with rope. They do not cry, they do not speak. Silence has become the new etiquette of mourning. Words waste breath, and breath might carry death. Your thoughts wander to the strange remedies whispered in the city. Some say you should not sleep on your back, lest the pestilence settle deeper into your chest. Others insist you eat nothing but figs and walnuts, or smear your body with resin and crushed lilies. One neighbor even bragged that he boiled his urine to inhale the vapors. You recall this proudly, as if discovering an early spa treatment, until you learned he was buried 2 days later. Medieval wellness trends, guaranteed to make you feel better right up until you stop feeling anything at all. Outside a merchant's house stands eerily open. Once he was wealthy, his courtyard buzzing with apprentices and wagons. Now the shutters flap loose doors, swinging wide. Strangers slip in and out, scavenging freely. Gold rings, tapestries, candlesticks. What does wealth matter in a city where tomorrow is not promised? In another age, looters would be punished. Today, no one has the strength to stop them. Death has become the great equalizer, turning palaces into tombs and leaving the poor to wander through them like reluctant heirs. The streets whisper stories of cities far away in Siena, construction on the cathedral, stopped mid-chisel tools, left abandoned on scaffolds as masons collapsed one by one. In Venice, entire parishes emptied in weeks, canals flowing with funeral barges instead of cargo. In Florence, half the population gone within months. You imagine them all, each city waking as you do each sunrise, heavy with dread. It is a Europe-wide dawn, chorus not of birds, but of bells. And still, people cling to life in strange ways. Some drink to excess, laughing in taverns, as if to spite the silence outside. Others lock themselves indoors, refusing to speak or touch. The extremes blur together like a desperate gamble with fate. You could join the drinkers, but you've seen them stumble into the streets, coughing blood between songs. You could hide behind shutters, but starvation is as cruel as infection. So you hover in between, waking each day, not knowing which side you'll tip toward. A soft knock startles you. At the door stands a boy no older than 12. His face is pale, eyes wide with exhaustion. He holds out a small loaf of bread, hard, misshapen, but food nonetheless. From the baker, he mutters, though you know the baker died last week. Charity has grown anonymous, passed like a secret each act of kindness, wrapped in silence. You take the bread, fingers brushing his. The boy flinches as though touch itself burns. Then he is gone, darting into the fog of the street. You break the loaf and chew slowly, each mouthful turning to dust in your dry mouth. It tastes of survival more than nourishment. The candle burns lower. Outside, the sun climbs reluctantly, its light thin and gray. You feel no warmth from it, only the hollow reminder that another day has begun, whether you are ready or not. You wonder how many more mornings you will rise to this emptiness. The city wakes, yes, but it wakes into morning. And so you prepare yourself quietly for whatever the hours ahead will bring. You tighten your cloak. You whisper a prayer that feels both futile and necessary, and you steel yourself against the silence. Morning is over. The day has begun. And in the time of the Black Death, that is less promise than it is warning. Your stomach wakes before your mind does, growling in protest like a stray dog left too long in the cold. Hunger has become the steady rhythm of your days. You rise from your stool, the crust of bread from earlier still lodged between your teeth, so dry it feels like chewing parchment. Once mornings promised the smell of bread, rising stews simmering, or fish sizzling on the pan. Now, the city's kitchens are silent ovens, cold pots empty. You step into the street and head toward the marketplace, though calling it that feels almost cruel. The stalls stand skeletal wooden frames creaking in the breeze. Once bright awnings have been torn for firewood. A few baskets sit abandoned, filled not with fresh produce, but with shriveled onions and bruised turnips, the kind of vegetables even pigs might hesitate over. Flies cluster thickly buzzing like they've become the new customers. The air is heavy with the sour, sweet scent of rot, an odor so familiar now it feels woven into the fabric of the city itself. A man at the corner sells bread, if you can call it that. The loaves are small, misshapen, hard as stones. He claims they are made with rye and wheat, but the taste tells another story. Sawdust, ground acorns, maybe even scraps of spoiled flour, all mashed together to fool the eye. You watch a woman break one in half. The crust splinters like dry wood crumbs scattering like gravel. She chews slowly, each bite tugging at her jaw. People say bread should be the staff of life. This staff feels more like a cudgel. Still, the price is outrageous. A loaf costs more than some families earn in a week. Inflation has run wild, fueled by fear and scarcity. Grain caravans no longer arrive. Ships are turned away from harbors, and what little supply remains is hoarded by the wealthy. You overhear an old man mutter, "Better to eat the rats themselves." A grim joke, but not entirely false. In some quarters, roasted rat has become a delicacy, born of desperation, skin crisped over fire bones, cracked for marrow. You picture it and swallow hard, unsure whether your revulsion or your hunger wins. Wine flows more freely than bread, strangely enough. Taverns stay open, though not for feasts. People drink because water feels dangerous, whispered to carry poison. Better to numb yourself with sour ale than risk a mouthful of infection. You peek into a tavern doorway and see the men hunched over mugs, faces flushed singing hoarse songs that collapse into coughing fits. The smell of alcohol clings to the walls sharp and bitter. A priest once warned that drunkenness was a sin. These days, sin is the only thing left on the menu. Rumors cling to food as tightly as fleas to rats. Some say certain spices ward off the plague: nutmeg, coriander, ginger luxuries, so costly they may as well be myth. Apothecaries sell powders mixed with ground pearls or ambergris, claiming they will fortify the spirit. You know better. Ambergris comes from whale vomit. Imagine scraping the ocean's trash just to sprinkle it on your porridge, and then dying anyway. Medieval superfoods, proof that marketing existed long before Instagram. As you walk through the thinning crowd, you notice one stall still thriving. A man sells garlic bulbs by the handful, their pungent aroma cutting through the stench of decay. He swears they keep the sickness away. People clutch them like talismans, hanging braids of garlic by their doors, wearing cloves around their necks. The irony is sharp breath reeking so strongly of garlic that no one wants to come near you. Maybe that's the real protection, social distancing, 14th century style. At home, your meals are sparse. Breakfast is crusts, softened with thin broth. Dinner might be beans, boiled to mush if beans can be found at all. The wealthy dine better, their tables still laid with spiced meat and sugared fruits, but even their servants are fewer each day. Food rots on silver platters as swiftly as on wooden ones. You think of Siena, where survivors described neighbors feasting excessively determined to live while they could. Giovanni Boccaccio wrote of revelers who sang, drank, and gambled until death claimed them mid-toast. YOLO. You think grimly, though. Here it translates to "you only last outbreak." The strangest part is how appetite itself has changed. Some people gorge, others starve themselves. Fear poisons. The tongue makes every bite taste uncertain. You chew and wonder, did the baker cough into this dough? Did the vendor's wife handle this bean? With plague-stained fingers, eating has become a gamble, not just against hunger, but against the invisible hand of death. And yet you eat, because the body insists, even when the mind recoils. Hunger is stubborn, louder than bells, more persistent than fear. You tear off another piece of bread jaw, aching, and swallow with effort. The taste is nothing, but the act itself feels like defiance, as if by chewing you remind the plague it hasn't claimed you yet. The midday sun creeps across the rooftops, washing the market square in a pale light that only emphasizes its emptiness. Hunger sharpens your senses. Every smell becomes a temptation, every scrap a possibility. Somewhere, someone is boiling cabbage, thin, watery, the scent wafting like a ghost across the street. You pause, inhaling deeply, and for a moment you almost forget the stench of rot. Almost. The two smells mix together, cabbage and corpse, like a recipe no cookbook would ever print. Children dart through alleys, clutching crusts or gnawing on bones, scavenged from refuse piles. Their faces are gaunt cheeks, hollowed, but their eyes still glitter with the stubbornness of life. You remember when children carried toys or wooden hoops. Now, their treasures are scraps of food, and the game is survival. A little girl tugs a rag doll in one hand and a moldy apple in the other. You wonder which she values more. Rumors of poisoned wells spill into conversations about meals. Some neighbors claim the Jews are responsible, sprinkling powders into water or flour. Others mutter about astrologers who predicted disaster from planetary alignments. You've heard it all: bad air, divine punishment, even too many ripe figs. Whatever the theory, the result is the same fear that taints every bite. A sip of wine might carry damnation. A spoonful of stew might hold betrayal. Trust like bread is scarce. You pass a butcher's stall or what used to be one. Hooks hang empty flies, buzzing lazily in the heat. Once there would have been beef, pork, lamb. Now people whisper of cats and dogs, vanishing from the streets of pigeons, roasted over small fires, feathers drifting like ash. Protein is protein. Survival insists. The idea makes you gag, yet your body hums with hunger all the same. In another life, you might have turned up your nose. In this one, you glance at the stray mutt in the corner and quickly look away. Herbs and spices still circulate, though only the rich can afford them. Apothecaries offer sachets of rosemary wormwood and sage, promising to cleanse the air. Some households burn them until the rooms choke with smoke, turning dinner into a ritual of coughing fits. A physician once recommended stuffing herbs into a chicken, roasting it, then inhaling the steam to drive sickness away. He died naturally, but the recipe lingers half cure, half meal. Medieval medicine really was just a buffet of wishful thinking. At home, you sit with your meager portion, a broth so thin it barely deserves the name. Floating in it are scraps of cabbage and barley grains, swollen but tasteless. You sip slowly, the warmth coating your throat. It is not delicious, but it is something. And in this age, something is a luxury. Each swallow feels like both surrender and triumph. You're alive, you're eating, you're still here. Sometimes meals are communal. Survivors gather in courtyards or around makeshift fires, pooling what little they have. A hunk of cheese, a handful of beans, a flask of ale passed between trembling hands. The conversations that follow are not of joy, but of numbers. How many dead in Florence this week? How many carts passed through Siena yesterday? Still, there is comfort in chewing together, even when the taste is fear. Eating in Milans is survival. Eating in company is resistance. And yet indulgence has its own voice. You've seen the revelers, men and women, who feast excessively, drinking and dancing, as though tomorrow has already been cancelled. Boccaccio wrote of them, neighbors who laughed at the plague, moving from tavern to tavern, satisfying every appetite. Some died mid-revel, collapsing with cups still in hand. A tragic ending. Yes, but at least with a good aftertaste. You can't help but smirk if the Black Death came for you at the table. Maybe at least you wouldn't die hungry. Your own hunger ebbs and flows, sometimes forgotten, sometimes overwhelming. It gnaws at your ribs, sharpens your mood. Bread is never enough, broth never filling, but your body clings stubbornly to life. You picture England, where after the plague wages rose, labor grew scarce, and suddenly peasants could demand more. They say hunger leads to change. For now, though, it only leads to another hollow stomach and another desperate glance at empty shelves. Evening creeps in. The market shutters, doors close. Smoke rises from chimneys where meals are being shared thin as they are. You clutch your cloak and walk home, bread tucked under your arm like treasure. Each step echoes with the knowledge that you've survived one more day of scarcity. Tomorrow, the hunger will return, but tonight there is at least bread to chew. As night begins to press down on the city, the question of food lingers like an itch you cannot scratch. Hunger never truly leaves it, just waits crouched in the corners of your ribs, reminding you of what is missing. You sit at the table, such as it is a slab of rough wood, scarred by years of use. A single candle flickers beside you, its light making your shadow stretch across the wall like a ghost reaching for supper. On the table lies your prize from the market, a small loaf already cracking at the edges. You break it in half and hear the sharp snap of crust. Inside the dough is dense gray, flecked with husks. You chew slowly, jaw aching, as if gnawing on wood. Each swallow sticks in your throat until you chase it with a sip of sour ale. The liquid burns down bitter and sharp. You tell yourself it is good, that the bitterness is proof of life. But the truth is simple. This is survival, not satisfaction. Outside, you hear voices. A group of revelers staggers past, their laughter high and sharp, like glass breaking. They sing snatches of song off key, the words slurred. The smell of wine clings to them, heavy and sweet. You know their type, those who believe indulgence is a shield, that by laughing loudly enough, they can drown out the tolling bells. They clutch each other, weaving from wall to wall, cups raised. You shake your head, half in pity, half in envy. There's a strange freedom in pretending death cannot catch you if you move quickly enough. Not far away, a different sound rises, the low chanting of flagellants. Barefoot men stripped to the waist pass through the street in a line. Their hoods bear red crosses. Their whips slice the air with sickening rhythm. Blood spatters on the stones as they beat themselves, hoping each lash pays for sin. Onlookers watch in silence, clutching their rosaries and garlic charms. You can almost taste the copper tang of blood on the night air. In their minds, pain is purification. In yours, it is just another feast for the flies. You tear off another bite of bread, chewing despite the dryness. Your thoughts wander to kitchens, left abandoned, pots, cold larders, emptied, to orchards heavy with fruit. No one is left to pick, grain fields swaying golden, with no sickles to cut them. Hunger is not just yours, it is a shadow laid across all of Europe. In England, records already tell of villages left half empty, crops rotting in the fields. In Siena, bakers fled, and the people starved as bread disappeared from stalls. The famine of plague is not one of absence, but of paralysis. There is food, but not enough hands to bring it to mouths. Your own hands tremble as you lift the cup again. You wonder if tomorrow you'll wake with stomach pangs, or with the swell of buboes beneath your arms. Hunger and plague feel like twin hunters, circling each waiting for its turn. One gnaws at your belly, the other at your breath. Together they remind you how fragile a body can be, and yet here you are, finishing your meal. Thin though it is, it binds you to life. The bread gone, the ale drained you. Lick crumbs from your fingers, unwilling to waste even a grain. For a moment, you close your eyes and let the candle's warmth trick you into believing you are satisfied. Hunger will return with the dawn, but tonight you can pretend. You blow out the candle, darkness rushing in. The last taste of bread lingers on your tongue, bitter, stale, but real. You have eaten, you have endured, and in a city where half the tables sit empty, that alone is victory enough. Not everyone starves. Beyond the crumbling markets and empty stalls, behind stone walls and iron gates, the wealthy still dine. In great halls, candles blaze, tables groan under platters of roasted meat, sugared fruits, and delicate pastries dusted with spice. The air there smells of cinnamon and honey, not rot and vinegar, yet even these feasts taste hollow. Servants vanish one by one, musicians cough between songs, and every toast carries the silent question, will I live to raise another? You imagine slipping into one of those banquets. the gleam of silver goblets, the rich aroma of roasted goose. For a moment, it feels intoxicating, but then you remember half the guests will be corpses within the week. Luxury doesn't stop fleas, and faith doesn't sterilize food. In fact, many noble families fell faster dining together in close halls, breathing the same poisoned air. Wealth bought spices, but not survival. For the poor, indulgence takes a different shape. Taverns fill with laughter and drunken shouts. Bread may be scarce, but ale still flows cheap and abundant. Some drink until they collapse, convinced that joy itself is medicine. Others gather in secret rooms, sharing whatever scraps remain: fish bones boiled twice, stale crust softened with broth, apples brown with age. They raise their cups anyway. If the world ends tomorrow, at least they ended it together. And strangely, these desperate meals leave an echo. In the years after the plague, survivors will crave gatherings, festivals, shared tables. The Renaissance will bloom not only in art and science, but in kitchens. New recipes, richer flavors, the joy of food rediscovered. Out of famine and fear, Europe learns again to taste. For now, though you chew your crust, sip your ale, and listen to the revelers and the mourners alike. Hunger binds all, whether in palaces or hovels. The only difference is what's on the plate, and even that may not matter for long. The morning after a meal that hardly deserved the name, you might expect the rhythm of work to call. In another time, streets would already ring with the clang of hammers, the shouts of merchants, the creak of wagons loaded with grain. But now, the city hums with a different sound: the scrape of shovels in graveyards, the rattle of carts collecting the dead. The ordinary labors of life have been replaced by the extraordinary labor of death. You wander toward the square where once craftsmen gathered. Cobblers mended shoes, smiths pounded iron, scribes bent over parchment. Today, their stalls stand abandoned. A half-finished shoe sits on a bench, its leather stiff with dust. An anvil lies silent, its last echo swallowed months ago. Parchments curl in the damp, their ink fading like the words themselves gave up. Work, it seems, has fled along with those who once performed it. On the edge of the square, a tailor's shop hangs open. Bolts of cloth, once precious, now gather grime. The tailor himself is gone, carried off by sickness or fear. In the absence of hands, the fabric lies untouched, slowly rotting. You brush your fingers against the wool, surprised at its softness, even in neglect. Once it might have become a fine cloak. Now it is just another relic of lives interrupted. The guilds that once ruled the cities, rhythm bakers, masons, merchants, find themselves paralyzed. Meetings are canceled, charters ignored. Who needs rules when half the members are in the ground? In Florence, work on the cathedral stalled. Stones still lie stacked in neat rows, scaffolds left to weather chisels frozen mid-cut. You can almost see the ghost of a mason arm, raised hammer forever suspended. A building meant to outlast centuries has been undone in weeks, not by war, but by silence. And silence, you realize, has become the true master of labor. Streets that once bustled now carry only whispers. Laborers who survive demand higher wages, emboldened by scarcity. In England, peasants who once bent to their lords suddenly find themselves in demand. Who will cut your wheat, they ask? Who will mend your roof? For once, the answer is not obvious. For once, the powerful squirm. You almost laugh if death is an equalizer. Hunger is the Union rep, yet the lords resist. In 1340, King Edward III decreed that wages must remain frozen at pre-plague levels. You picture him scribbling the law quill, scratching convinced words on parchment could hold back desperation. It didn't work, of course. Laws cannot resurrect laborers, nor can parchment bind those who have seen death and learned their own worth. Workers slip away to towns seeking better pay, abandoning fields that lie fallow. The old order crumbles, not with a bang, but with a slow, stubborn refusal to show up for work. Imagine the world's first great resignation, except the office is a muddy field, and your boss is a baron with a sword. Still, not everyone gains. Many families fall into ruin, their labor lost to the plague. Farms wither, harvests rot. In France, villages empty completely, leaving only crumbling walls and overgrown paths. In England, manors shrink into ghost estates, their tenants scattered. You think of Nicholas Denny, who watched his entire family die in Walsham, inheriting acres he never wanted. Land is meaningless when there are no hands to till it. Wealth in earth feels more like a burden than a blessing. Walking past the workshops, you glimpse a different kind of worker, the plague opportunist. Charlatans in long robes, hawk potions, powders, charms. One waves a bundle of herbs, promising it will keep sickness from the lungs. Another sells wax amulets stamped with holy images. They shout louder than the merchants ever did, their cries ringing in the quiet. Protection, cure, salvation. Their voices drip with certainty. Their customers hollow-eyed clutch coins and hope alike. You almost want to applaud the performance. In a dead economy, fear is the last booming trade, but even the opportunists fade quickly. You find one sprawled in an alley, his potions spilled, his lips blue, no remedy strong enough to protect him from irony. You step carefully around the bottles, their contents staining the stones. Somewhere in the distance, the bells toll again. You wonder if they toll for him or for the city entire. The air grows heavy with the smell of lime. Workers spread it over bodies, over alleyways, over floors. Once lime whitened walls and cleansed cloth. Now it hides the stench of decay. Lime workers are among the busiest in the city, their sacks running empty as quickly as they can be filled. They labor without pause, spreading powder until their huts crack, coughing on dust. It is work, yes, but not the kind anyone wished for. You pause at the edge of a field beyond the walls. Once men bent here with scythes, their songs rising with the cut of wheat. Now the stalks stand uncut, swaying aimlessly. Birds peck at the grain mice, scurry through it. The abundance feels cruel. Food is here, but no hands remain to harvest. You kneel, crush a head of wheat in your palm, and let the grains fall like sand. The earth still gives, but people no longer take. It is the strangest contradiction, hunger amidst plenty, famine amidst fields of gold. As the sun dips, shadows stretch long across abandoned tools. You walk back through the city, past workshops that will not reopen, fields that will not be sown, laws that cannot bind the living. Work has ended, not because people refuse, but because death has signed their resignation for them. And so the city stumbles into evening, carried not by labor, but by inertia. Survival itself has become the only occupation. The streets feel quieter as the afternoon stretches on, as though even the sun has grown weary of shining on a city that no longer works. You wander past what used to be the heartbeat of commerce, the docks. Once the air here rang with shouts of sailors, the groan of ropes, the splash of barrels lowered onto stone quays. Now the water laps softly, the masts swaying like skeletons. Ships that do arrive often bring not goods, but disease their crews, coughing their holds, carrying more fleas than flour. Merchants who once dreamed of gold dread the sight of sails on the horizon. You pause at a warehouse door. Inside sacks of grain lie untouched dust, settling thick on their surfaces. Once this storehouse meant wealth, now it feels like a mausoleum. No stevedores swarm to unload, no clerks tally accounts. The rats have claimed it, darting between the sacks with bold confidence. They seem to work harder than any man, and with more success. It is a bitter irony the plague thrives, not because people labor, but because they no longer do. Further inland, the once busy offices of scribes and tax collectors sit silent. Parchments curl on desks, their ink faded, their wax seals broken. You imagine the scribes who once bent over them, quills scratching faces, furrowed in concentration. Now, silence rules. Even kings feel the absence. Taxes dwindle, records vanish, authority becomes a whisper rather than a command. When half the workforce lies in graves, the rest quickly learn that paperwork cannot enforce obedience. Some jobs do thrive, though. Not the kind anyone envies. Gravediggers are never idle. They toil day and night, spades clanging, sweat dripping into the soil. Their arms are corded with muscle, their eyes ringed with fatigue. In normal times, their work was steady, but modest. Now, they are indispensable, laboring at the edge of exhaustion. Yet no one thanks them. They are feared, whispered about as death's own companions. Children cross themselves when they pass. The irony is sharp in a world that worships work. The only workers left are the ones digging holes for everyone else. Another profession flourishes too, the notary. With death knocking daily, wills must be written. In cities like Florence and Avignon, notaries work until their hands cramp, drafting hurried documents that bequeath land coin and livestock. But with whole families dying together, inheritance often collapses into absurdity, bequeathing a field to a son already dead, naming a widow who never survives to claim it. The ink dries, the names vanish, and the parchments pile like autumn leaves. Bureaucracy chokes on mortality. You hear rumors of entire trades disappearing. In some towns, there are no more weavers. Their looms sit idle threads gathering dust. In others, bakers vanish, leaving ovens cold and stomachs empty. Even shepherds die, their flocks wandering untended. Sheep multiply freely, their wool left to mat and rot. It is said in England that so many sheep roamed wild after the plague that fields turned white with them. The landscape itself became a monument to absence wool. Without weavers' fields, without farmers' churches, without choirs. And yet, in the cracks, change stirs. Survivors find opportunity where work has collapsed. Peasants move to towns, demanding wages that would have been unthinkable before. Craftsmen expand their shops, filling gaps left by the dead. Widows take up their husbands' trades, forging new independence. It is uneven, unpredictable, but undeniable. Work does not vanish entirely. It shifts, reshapes, reorders. The plague breaks the old rhythms, and new ones, tentative and fragile, begin to hum beneath the silence. Still, the city today does not feel reborn. It feels paralyzed. You pass a construction site where walls rise half finished. Stones lie scattered scaffolds, creak in the wind. The workers are gone, carried off, or fled. Tools rust, mortar dries into useless clumps. You imagine future generations staring at these ruins, wondering why men stopped mid build. The truth is simple. The workers stopped because their bodies did. As the bells toll again, you realize something grim. In this age, work itself is a kind of prayer. To hammer a shoe, to till a field, to write a line, each act defies the silence of death. And yet most prayers now go unanswered. The plague has made unemployment universal not by choice, but by grave necessity. The day wanes. You walk past shuttered shops, silent quays, abandoned fields. Everywhere you feel the weight of labor undone. Work has always been the heartbeat of cities, the song of life in motion. Now that song is hushed, replaced by the dirge of bells. Survival has become the only job left, and everyone works overtime. The city feels like a stage after the actors have fled. Costumes hang limp, scripts lie unfinished, and the audience, well, most of them are dead. Professions that once gave rhythm to daily life vanish with eerie speed. Teachers no longer gather pupils in cloisters. Children's laughter has thinned to silence. Minstrels, who once filled taverns with song, now pluck strings only for funerals. Even soldiers, usually plentiful in every corner of Europe, desert their posts. Why defend walls when the enemy is inside every lung? You pass the courthouse, its doors barred. Justice has gone on holiday, though no one knows when or if it will return. Cases pile up like bodies, disputes over land, over dowries, over debts. The clerks who once scribbled records lie in trenches, their inkpots tipped like spilled blood. For those still alive, the law feels irrelevant. After all, if your neighbor steals your goat, who will enforce the punishment? The judge, he's already in the graveyard. The sheriff, he's hiding in the countryside. In a strange twist, the plague has given birth to anarchy by attrition. Some thrive in the void. Thieves roam openly, looting homes abandoned by death. Their footsteps echo in noble halls. Their laughter rings in empty chambers. You see one slip from a merchant's house, carrying candlesticks under his cloak. Once this would have been scandal. Now it is simply redistribution, plague style. Even the church admits its grip is slipping. Priests who survive are stretched thin, sometimes refusing to bury the dead for fear of infection. Their absence leaves more room for impostors, wandering preachers, selling salvation as if it were a loaf of bread. The trades that endure often mutate into something grotesque. Entertainers, deprived of festivals, now perform in streets for coins, tossed by hollow-eyed crowds. Their jokes fall flat. Their songs echo strangely. Still people watch desperate for any distraction. Humor in plague time is a strange beast laughter that tastes of ash comedy that borders on cruelty. If TikTok had existed in 1349, the trending content would probably be dance challenges by flagellants, blood and all. Meanwhile, women step into roles once barred to them. Widows run taverns, manage shops, even oversee farms. Necessity is the mother of invention and reinvention. Records from England show women inheriting land, wielding authority long denied them. You glimpse a widow at her stall, hawking garlic and vinegar with practiced skill. Her voice is steady, her gaze sharp. The world may be collapsing, but she is rebuilding in her own way. Quietly, history bends. In rural villages, the absence of labor hits hardest. Fields overgrow, vines wither, orchards rot. Some peasants flee to towns, lured by higher wages, leaving manors empty. Lords, desperate to keep their estates alive, clamp down with laws. In England, the statute of laborers demands that peasants accept old wages, forbids them from moving freely. But parchment cannot chain hunger, and men slip away at night, carrying their families toward towns. Freedom smells stronger than fear. In France, Germany, Italy, everywhere the feudal system trembles, you can almost hear the old order cracking like ice beneath too much weight. Not all changes are grim. Survivors discover strange opportunities. An apprentice who once swept a workshop now inherits the trade outright. A farmhand becomes master of land his lord abandoned. Orphans, grim as it is, sometimes inherit entire households. A boy who yesterday had nothing now owns 3 fields, though he plows them with grief rather than pride. The plague does not just kill, it rearranges. Lives shuffle like cards in a deck, fortunes rising and falling in unpredictable hands. You think of Avignon, where Pope Clement VI himself holed up between roaring fires, convinced the heat would cleanse the air. Outside, thousands died, while within his physician, Guy de Chauliac, scribbled notes about how little could be done. And yet even he returned to work after cutting open his own buboes and surviving. The image is almost absurd. A physician carving at his own body, then stepping back into his study to record observations. In an age of professional collapse, that sort of stubborn labor feels both heroic and insane. And still, the most common work remains death's endless chores. Digging, carrying, burning. Workers heft bodies into carts, lay them in trenches, scatter lime. Others wash clothes, fumigate houses, scrape streets. It is not noble, not glamorous, but it is necessary. If the plague has a workforce, it is these grim custodians. Their pay is fear, their wage survival, and they labor on because someone must. As the day fades, you watch shadows stretch across a half-built wall, a half-plowed field, a half-finished parchment. The world is full of beginnings that never reached their ends. Work stalls, not because men lost will, but because death stole hands. And in that silence, you realize something unsettling. For the first time in memory, the world has paused. No hammer rings, no plow sings, no quill scratches. The rhythm of human effort has faltered, replaced by the steady toll of bells. You walk home through the twilight, listening to that silence. Tomorrow, perhaps, some tool will stir, some hand will lift again. But tonight, the city feels suspended, its work undone, its labors dissolved. Survival is the only occupation left, and even that job has no guarantee of steady employment. You wake to the sound of coughing, not the polite kind, but the deep rattling cough that seems to claw at the lungs from the inside. It comes from the house next door, then echoes from across the street, until the city sounds like a sick choir rehearsing the same dreadful hymn. The air itself feels damp, heavy, with the weight of breath, carrying things you cannot see, but can almost taste. You glance at your arm, tracing the skin nervously. Everyone does now. A flea bite, a small swelling, a strange blotch. It could mean nothing, or it could mean you have days left. Buboes, they call them, swellings that bloom in armpits and groins, like grotesque fruit. The unlucky watch them grow hot and painful skin, stretching until it splits. Physicians say it is the body's way of pushing out corruption. Survivors are rare. And then there is the fever, the sudden chill followed by heat so fierce it feels as though your blood is boiling. Sweat soaks, sheets chills, shake bones and headaches, pound until thoughts blur. Some slip into delirium, muttering prayers or curses. Others fall silent, too weak to speak. When consciousness flickers, the line between waking and dying blurs. Imagine trying to nap through that. You wouldn't. Still, the body finds new ways to terrify. The mnemonic form attacks the lungs. Victims cough until blood splatters their lips. Breath-ragged chest heaving like a bellows, collapsing. Death comes in days, sometimes hours. Worse, it spreads easily a cough, infecting those nearby. Families collapse together, one cough passing to the next, like a deadly inheritance. In crowded houses, it feels inevitable like dominoes, tipping one by one. The septicemic form is crueler still. It poisons the blood, turning skin black with bruises that spread like ink in water. Death follows within a single day. No warning, no time for prayers. One moment, you are standing, the next, you are gone. Survivors whisper of seeing friends collapse mid-sentence, their lips blue, their eyes wide. God's judgment, some say. Others simply stop asking questions. Physicians do what they can, though can is generous. They bleed patients, hoping to balance the humors. They prescribe lettuce figs or crushed pearls. They burn herbs until rooms choke with smoke, convinced foul air is the culprit. Gentile da Foligno himself suggested a mix of lily roots and dried human excrement applied directly to buboes. Spoiler, he died in 1348. If Yelp had existed, medieval medicine would have had 0 stars, would not recommend. Cleanliness is a concept few grasp. Most homes reek of waste and smoke. Chamber pots spill into streets, mingling with animal dung and refuse. Dogs and pigs roam freely gnawing on scraps. Fleas thrive in straw mattresses, in the seams of clothing rarely washed. People wear the same garments for weeks, their skin crawling with lice. Bathing is rare, seen by some as dangerous. Water, after all, is said to open pores, letting in poisoned air. Better to stink alive than wash and die, they reason. It's a tough sell, but medieval logic was creative that way. You walk past a bathhouse shuttered and silent. Once it rang with laughter and gossip, steam rising from tubs. Now it is abandoned, blamed for spreading sickness. The irony, the very places that might have helped hygiene are condemned. Instead, people fumigate homes with vinegar, carry posies of herbs, or press sponges soaked in wine to their faces. You see one woman clutching a bouquet of roses so tightly her knuckles whiten. She inhales as though the petals themselves hold salvation. Her eyes are red, though not from the plague, from the smoke that hangs everywhere. The streets reek of death, disguised by desperate perfumes. Wormwood, sage, and rosemary smolder in braziers. Vinegar is splashed on walls, floors, even hands. The mingling of scents is dizzying sweet rot, sharp vinegar, acrid smoke. You breathe through it all, feeling your lungs ache, unsure which is worse, the disease itself or the remedies. At night, the coughing grows louder. You curl beneath your cloak ears, straining, heart racing at every sound. Somewhere someone screams a raw, guttural sound that ends suddenly. Silence follows heavier than before. You clutch your chest, whispering prayers, though your voice shakes. Each night feels like a gamble. Will you wake with clear skin, or with the first dark bruise blooming beneath your arm? Morning drifts in, and with it, the smell thick, sour, unmistakable. It clings to your clothes, seeps into your hair, settles on your tongue. The city is rotting, not just in body, but in breath. You try to draw air shallowly, as though that might protect you. Physicians call it miasma, the poisoned air. And while they're wrong about the science, you can't deny the sensation. Every inhale feels like swallowing despair. In the square, you find a group of plague doctors. Their long beaked masks jut out like carrion birds. Inside the beak, they've stuffed herbs, juniper, lavender, mint. Supposedly, the sweet smells filter disease. You know better. The only thing they filter is hope. Still, their appearance is hypnotic, black cloaks, gleaming rods, tapping the ground as they walk. Children whisper and point half in awe, half in terror. If medieval Europe had horror movies, these men would have been the poster boys. You watch them prod a man slumped against a wall. His skin is mottled purple, his breathing shallow. They don't lift him or offer comfort. Instead, they mark his door with paint, signaling contagion. Then they move on, leaving him to shiver alone. You shudder. Medicine here is less about healing, more about bookkeeping, counting the dying, not saving them. The remedies never stop flowing. Some burn sulfur, choking on its fumes. Others press gemstones to their skin, convinced jewels can draw out poison. In wealthy homes, ambergris perfumes the air, the byproduct of whale intestines, now considered luxury salvation. You imagine explaining that to someone today? Yes, it's whale vomit. Very expensive. Smells divine. No, it won't save you. Not all remedies come in bottles. Some say laughter is a cure. Taverns still ring with drunken jokes, their patrons swearing that merriment itself drives off death. You glimpse a group staggering through the streets, faces flushed, cups raised. Their joy feels desperate, forced a thin veil over dread. Within days, some of those faces will be pale, their cups overturned in the mud. The line between laughing it off and coughing it up is tragically thin. Meanwhile, hygiene collapses. Refuse pulls in alleys. Chamber pots spill unchecked. The city was filthy before, but now filth feels weaponized. Dogs sniff at the gutters. Pigs root in waste flies, thicken in the air like smoke. You watch a woman empty a bucket from her window, its contents splattering the cobblestones. The stench is immediate, overpowering, and somewhere in that foul slurry, fleas crawl, waiting for their next host. In Jewish quarters, the air smells different. By law, families wash hands before meals, after waking, after relieving themselves. Their wells are covered, their streets swept more often. Some Christians notice the difference and draw the wrong conclusion. Instead of admiring the hygiene, they whisper accusations that the Jews poison wells, that their lower mortality means conspiracy. Fear blinds as surely as fever. It is easier to blame than to breathe. And so pogroms erupt, blood spilling not from disease, but from hate. At night, you lie awake listening. The coughing never stops. Sometimes you hear a retching, sometimes prayers, sometimes the scuffle of feet carrying bodies, and sometimes you hear nothing at all, the silence that follows a last breath. You press your hand to your chest, counting your own heartbeat, fragile as candlelight. Then there are the bodies, too many to bury properly. They are stacked in pits, layer upon layer. Lime is scattered to mask the smell, but it cannot mask the sight. Limbs entwined, faces frozen, mid grimace, children nestled against parents who could not save them. Chroniclers compare the pits to lasagna layers of flesh and earth. You think the description grotesque, but accurate. Hunger may stalk you, but appetite flees at such images. Even the animals sicken. Horses stumble, dogs whimper, cats vanish. The balance of life feels broken. The city is not just dying, it is decaying in slow motion. You wonder how long it can endure, how long you can endure. Every morning you wake intact feels less like a guarantee, more like a reprieve. Still you rise. You eat what little you can. You whisper a prayer, light a candle, wash your face with vinegar-soaked cloth, and then you step outside into the stinking air, into the coughing streets, into the endless gamble. Survival, you remind yourself, is not about thriving. It is about waking again tomorrow. And in plague time, that is miracle enough. It begins so small, a prickling at the skin, a sudden chill in the night. You wake with a shiver, convinced the blanket has slipped only to find sweat soaking your shirt. By morning, your throat is raw, your head pounding, as though iron hammers beat inside your skull. You press your palm to your neck and feel it, the swelling tender and hot, a bubo blooming. The word itself sounds harmless, almost playful, but the reality is not. Flesh stretches, pain sharpens, fever burns. Each throb is a reminder that the clock has started. You have seen it happen in others. First, the chill faces, pale lips trembling, then the heat cheeks, flushed eyes, glassy skin damp with sweat. Soon after, the buboes in the groin, the armpits, the neck. Purple-black blotches bloom across the body like ink spilled on parchment. Breathing becomes ragged, thoughts scatter. Some pray, others scream. Many simply fall silent, waiting for the end. The sounds haunt the streets. Coughs rattle like chains. Groans drift from shuttered homes. A child wails until the voice cracks into silence. Sometimes you hear prayers whispered in Latin, sometimes curses spat into the night, and sometimes there is only the sound of claws rats, scurrying fleas, leaping the true orchestra of plague. Inside homes, fear builds walls stronger than stone. Families abandon the sick, moving them to spare rooms, locking doors. Mothers push food through cracks, too afraid to enter. Brothers drag mattresses into alleys, leaving loved ones to die in the open air. Even priests hesitate, some refusing to give last rites. In Siena, records tell of children buried by their fathers and fathers buried by their sons until no one remained to bury at all. One shoemaker, Agnolo di Tura, wrote that he laid his own 5 children in the earth with his hands. Reading it is tragic, living it is worse. The body betrays itself in strange ways. Blisters rise skin, mottles, breath turns sour. Physicians warn that even looking at the sick might spread contagion, so the ill are left unseen, untended. Some choke on their own blood, coughing it onto sheets until the fabric stiffens. Others slip into delirium, raving at visions. Neighbors pretend not to hear, terrified that pity is fatal. Compassion becomes a luxury, kindness a liability. The remedies only add to the grotesque theater. A physician lances a bubo with a hot iron, the stench of burning flesh filling the room. He sprinkles herbs onto the wound, muttering charms, then leaves quickly, unwilling to linger. Another applies poultices of onions and butter, convinced the mixture will draw out poison. The patient writhes, but the disease does not care. Treatments blur the line between cure and torture, the sick reduced to experiments for desperate hands. Hygiene already poor collapses, further under strain. Mattresses crawl with lice, clothing stiff with sweat and dirt. Washing is rare. Water is feared. Some claim that opening the pores invites plague inside. Bathhouses close, once bustling with chatter, now silent and damp. Soap sits, unused herbs, burned in its place. Imagine trying to fight bacteria with scented candles. That is medieval public health in a nutshell. The city itself becomes a body infected. Streets swell with refuse, alleys weep with sewage. Carts spill corpses onto cobbles, lime dust, rising in white clouds. Flies swarm thick as full landing, on lips, on wounds, on food. The smell is constant, a mixture of rot smoke, vinegar, and fear. Your stomach clenches each time you breathe, but there is no escaping it. Even in churches, incense cannot mask the odor of death clinging to every stone. And yet, life stumbles on. A woman washes clothes in a bucket of vinegar, her hands raw and red. A man scrubs his doorway with lye until the wood splinters. Neighbors exchange recipes for protection. Crushed roses, wormwood camphor. Some wear charms of tin or bronze, engraved with saints' names. Others carry posies pressed to their noses. A pocket full of posies, they whisper. It sounds like a children's rhyme, but here it is a survival strategy. Night falls again, bringing no rest. You lie awake, listening to the rasp of your own breath, the creak of the beams above the distant toll of bells. Your skin prickles, your mind races. Each itch feels like a flea. Each cough feels like doom. You wonder if tomorrow you will wake whole or marked. Sleep itself becomes dangerous, a surrender to the unknown. And still morning comes, and you rise, perhaps weaker, perhaps unchanged. The routine continues. Vinegar on cloth, garlic hung by the door, prayers whispered, food chewed slowly. Life narrows to ritual, each act a charm against the inevitable. In this world, survival is not just luck, it is performance repeated daily until luck finally runs out. By now, the city feels less like a home and more like a wound that never heals. Every corner oozes decay. Horses collapse in the streets, their bodies left to stiffen until cartmen have time to drag them away. Dogs scavenge from corpses as readily as from scraps. Wells once the heart of life grow foul, their water tinged with rot. People approach them with suspicion, whispering of poison, of curses, of enemies unseen. Even thirst becomes a danger. Sanitation, such as it is, slips beyond control. The authorities try edicts, proclaim that refuse must be cleared, that graves must be dug deeper, that the sick must be quarantined. But laws crumble in the face of exhaustion. Too many die, too few remain to enforce. Lime is scattered liberally white streaks, staining alleys and yards, but it cannot disguise the reality. You walk past a churchyard overflowing, Graves gape open, bodies layered like cordwood. Trenches are filled faster than they can be dug. Some corpses barely covered, dogs pulling limbs free. The stench rises, clinging to your clothes, your hair, your very skin. People burn herbs, wave fans, even light bonfires in the streets to purify the air. Yet the smoke only thickens the misery smudging the sky until even sunlight feels dimmed. Inside homes, the same pattern repeats. Rooms darken, shutters close, straw piles rot, the sick are isolated, the healthy flee, and eventually silence settles. Neighbors pass by, quickly avoiding eye contact as though fear itself is contagious. Communities shrink into islands of suspicion, where once laughter and greetings bound streets together, now only coughing echoes. And through it all, survival becomes strangely ritualistic. Vinegar soaked cloths, garlic braids, whispered prayers, charms tied around wrists. Each act is a gesture against helplessness. Do they work? Likely not. But in a city where even physicians admit defeat, rituals become the last medicine. By the end of the day, you realize the city has transformed. It is no longer just a place to live. It is a body riddled with disease, its breath sour, its skin pocked, its strength fading, and tomorrow will bring more of the same. Still beneath the despair, another current stirs. People whisper of penance, of God's anger, of sins that must be purged. Some seek comfort in churches, others in processions, others in violence. Religion, always powerful, swells with new urgency. Fear seeks meaning, and meaning often wears the robes of faith. The bells toll again, not just for the dying, but as summons. Your stomach clenches as you realize the next chapter is not about sickness alone. It is about how society turns to heaven or to scapegoats when earth has nothing left to offer. The bells do not stop. Morning, noon, and night, they toll not to call the faithful to prayer, but to count the bodies. Still, the sound draws people to churches. Stone walls echo with whispered prayers. Incense rises in thick curls, and candle flames flicker against faces drawn with fear. You step inside one, the air heavy with smoke and desperation. Priests in worn vestments move among the pews, murmuring blessings, their own hands trembling. Faith has always been a comfort, but now it feels like the last fragile thread between earth and heaven. Some believe the plague is punishment, God's anger unleashed. They beat their breasts, confess sins, and beg forgiveness. Others argue it is the devil's work spread by witches or demons. The explanations shift like smoke, but all circle the same truth. People need meaning when death feels random. Even ignorance is preferable to chaos. Imagine watching half your neighbors vanish and then shrugging well bacteria. Not exactly comforting in the 14th century. Among the faithful, courage and terror intermingle. Priests who dare administer last rites often die soon after their bravery rewarded with burial. In Piacenza alone, 60 priests perished within weeks. Survivors whisper that even holy water cannot quench death's thirst. Still others refuse to enter homes, leaving families to die unshriven. Faith collides with fear, and fear often wins. In Avignon, Pope Clement VI orders processions, masses, and prayers to appease divine wrath. The papal court swells with chants, incense clouds, and the murmur of 1,000 desperate voices. Yet even here the plague creeps in. Cardinals die, servants vanish, and the city drowns in corpses. Clement retreats behind roaring fires, convinced flames purify the air. Imagine a medieval pope reinventing the sauna, not for relaxation, but for survival. But not all worship remains within churches. On the roads, a new movement appears, the flagellants. They march barefoot from town to town, hoods painted with red crosses, whips in their hands. With every step they chant hymns, then strike themselves until blood spatters the ground. Onlookers weep, convinced such suffering must sway heaven. Children stare wide-eyed, both horrified and mesmerized. The spectacle is part penance, part theater. If medieval Europe had Instagram, the flagellants would be trending, no pain, no salvation. The church, however, grows uneasy. Too much fervor, too much chaos. Independent processions threaten papal authority. What begins as devotion edges toward rebellion. And yet, how can Rome condemn people bleeding in Christ's name when the plague bleeds them anyway? Tension simmers, faith fragmenting under pressure. Meanwhile, whispers of blame grow louder. Jews are accused of poisoning wells, of summoning plague through sorcery. In towns like Strasbourg and Basel, pogroms ignite. Entire communities are burned, exiled, or slaughtered. Some Jews take their own lives rather than face the mob. Others flee eastward into Poland, where King Casimir offers protection. Hygiene laws, daily hand washing. Covered wells may have spared some lives, but instead of admiration, it breeds suspicion. The cruel irony, cleaner habits make you guilty. It is the darkest twist of scapegoating. Inside the church, you sit the chanting, droning on. The candles waver, shadows stretch. Faith offers comfort, yes, but outside, mobs sharpen knives, convinced murder is medicine. Religion binds some together and tears others apart. Society frays, and in its place, fear and faith weave a fabric too fragile to last. You leave the church as bells toll again. Above the sky hangs gray incense mingling with smoke from bonfires meant to cleanse the air. People kneel in the streets, clutching rosaries, whipping their backs, muttering curses against neighbors. It is devotion and desperation in equal measure. Oh, and as you walk, you realize in the age of plague, God is everywhere, yet nowhere to be found. The streets feel like an uneasy sermon. Everywhere you walk, faith and fear braid together, pulling in opposite directions. You pass a small chapel where the doors stand open, incense curling out into the street. Inside, the faithful kneel in rows, their lips moving silently. The smell of beeswax candles and burning rosemary hangs heavy, almost suffocating. A priest intones prayers, his voice quavering but steady. For a moment, the congregation looks peaceful, as though the rhythm of Latin chants could cage death. Step outside, and the mood shifts sharply. Just beyond the chapel, a crowd gathers shouting accusations. A man drags a woman by the arm, calling her a witch. She had been seen mixing herbs, burning them by her doorway. To you, it looks like a desperate attempt at fumigation. To her neighbors, it looks like sorcery. Within minutes, the whispers ignite into fury. Stones fly, curses spit, and fear takes human form. You walk quickly, eyes averted. In plague time, watching can be as dangerous as participating. Rumors spread faster than the disease. Some say the alignment of planets foretold this disaster. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn conspiring in the heavens. Others insist the air itself is poisoned, thick winds from stagnant waters carrying invisible death. Physicians at the University of Paris even issued reports confident that celestial conjunctions corrupted the atmosphere. You can almost smile at the thought. Professors debating planetary gossip while carts groan under corpses outside their doors. The social fabric frays. Fathers abandon children, wives flee husbands, siblings shut doors against each other. Chroniclers write with disbelief, as if they were not their own. Families, once the core of society, dissolve under pressure. In Siena courts, close bread disappears, construction halts. The cathedral still stands unfinished, frozen mid ambition. You think of it as the plague's own monument stone testimony to the day when even God's house lost its builders. Yet not all bonds shatter. Some form tighter than ever. Groups of flagellants march barefoot into towns, singing litanies, their bloodied backs proof of contrition. Crowds follow them, desperate for redemption. Children cry at the sight, while adults join in whipping themselves raw. Their processions feel less like prayer, more like theater with blood as the ticket price. If Netflix had existed in the 14th century, their tours would have been the number one show penance live season, 1349. The church, wary of losing control, condemns them. But even Rome cannot silence faith when fear feeds it. Ordinary people cling to any ritual that promises safety. Amulets inscribed with saints' names, pilgrimages to holy shrines, prayers whispered over vinegar-soaked cloths. Faith becomes improvisational, a patchwork of old traditions and desperate invention. And then the scapegoats. Jews accused of poisoning wells are tortured and burned. Entire communities vanish overnight. In Basel, hundreds are locked inside a wooden barn and set alight. In Worms, families commit mass suicide rather than face the mob. In Mainz, 6,000 are slaughtered in a single day. You think of the irony Jewish law demanded, hand-washing cleaner, wells-covered food. Those very habits may have spared some lives, and yet instead of admiration, they received the fire. History, it seems, has a cruel sense of humor. The division widens. Some turn inward, retreating to prayer and silence. Others turn outward, seeking enemies to blame. Hatred and devotion walk hand in hand. In some towns, processions of prayer pass streets littered with the ashes of pogroms. Faith comforts the faithful while condemning their neighbors. You feel the tension like a cord drawn tight, vibrating through the air. As night falls, you watch a procession pass beneath your window. Candles flicker, voices chant, feet shuffle. At the rear, a monk carries a cross so heavy it drags sparks from the cobbles. The people kneel as it passes, murmuring prayers. For a moment, the scene is almost beautiful, lit by soft, light voices rising like music. But beneath the surface lies dread. Tomorrow, some of these same voices may shout accusations or fall silent forever. In the plague years, religion is not merely belief, it is theater politics, violence, comfort and terror all at once. God feels closer than ever, and yet more absent too. And as you close your eyes, drifting toward uneasy sleep, you realize society itself is unraveling. Faith keeps it stitched together, but only barely, and the seams are fraying fast. You wake to the sound of chanting in the distance, low voices rising and falling, carried on the morning air. At first, you think it is another church procession, priests leading prayers through the streets. But as the sound draws closer, the rhythm changes. It is harsher, punctuated by the sharp crack of leather against skin. You step outside and see them, the flagellants, barefoot dressed in plain tunics, with hoods painted with red crosses. They march in a line. Each man carries a whip with 3 knotted thongs tipped with bits of metal. As they walk, they chant hymns, then strike their own backs in unison. The sound is sickening. Thwack, 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 followed by the spray of blood on cobblestones. Onlookers press close eyes wide, children clutching their mothers' skirts. Some weep, convinced that such suffering must surely soften God's anger. Others stare transfixed, as though watching a grim spectacle. And truthfully, it is both. The flagellants believe the plague is punishment for humanity's sins, and only by sharing Christ's suffering can the world be redeemed. They travel from town to town, sometimes hundreds at once, their processions filling squares and marketplaces. For 33 days, they march, chant, and bleed, imitating the years of Christ's life. To them, each lash is a prayer. To you, it looks more like theater faith as performance art, staged with whips instead of props. If medieval Europe had a ticket booths, someone would have charged admission. At first, towns welcome them. Their devotion inspires awe. Their discipline seems holy. But soon suspicion grows. They preach without church approval, stir crowds into frenzy, and sometimes incite violence against supposed sinners. The Pope himself condemns them, calling their processions dangerous and misguided. Yet the people's desperation outweighs papal authority. When priests refuse to visit plague houses and bishops retreat behind walls, the sight of men bleeding openly for salvation feels like proof of sincerity. Faith, after all, is measured not in words, but in wounds. But faith takes darker turns. In Strasbourg, Basel Mainz pogroms erupt. Jews are accused of poisoning wells, of conspiring with the devil. The stories spread like fleas, powders found in homes, confessions extracted under torture. Entire communities are slaughtered. Their synagogues burn, their people drowned or burned alive. Some take their own lives before the mobs arrive. In Mainz, over 6,000 die in a single day. You think of the bitter irony: daily hand washing, stricter food laws, cleaner wells, Jewish customs that may have slowed infection become the very evidence of guilt. Hygiene is mistaken for heresy. In some towns, the killings begin even before the plague arrives. Fear alone is enough to light torches, and fear is contagious. A whisper in one village becomes a massacre in the next. Even papal bulls declaring the Jews innocent cannot halt the tide. When death feels random, people crave someone to blame. It is easier to sharpen knives than to accept uncertainty. If Twitter had existed, hashtags would have trended: hashtag poisoned wells, burn the Jews, and behind each trend, lives vanish in smoke. Meanwhile, society itself unravels. Families splinter, communities turn inward. In Florence, Boccaccio wrote of brothers abandoning brothers' wives, refusing husbands, parents deserting children. The bonds that once tied society together snap under strain. Compassion withers, suspicion thrives. A cough in the wrong moment can mark you for exile. A rumor can strip away your safety. Even kindness feels dangerous. You hesitate before offering bread to a neighbor, wondering if their hand will carry contagion to yours. The church struggles to maintain authority. Priests die in droves, monasteries empty. Surviving clergy face suspicion if they lived. While others perished, Surely they must harbor secrets. Some turn to wealth, selling indulgences, promising salvation for coin. Others retreat entirely, leaving their flocks untended. The image of holy men dying bravely beside the sick exists but rarer than the church admits. Faith may be eternal, but priests are mortal, and yet the hunger for faith grows fiercer. Processions, prayers, pilgrimages, all swell with new urgency. In Avignon, Pope Clement consecrates the Rhone River itself, declaring bodies cast into it properly buried. 7,000 houses stand empty, cardinals dead, yet the city still sings hymns into the void. Religion becomes both shield and sword comfort, for some justification for violence against others. You walk through a market square and see the tension embodied. On one side, a group of women kneel rosaries, clutched faces upturned in prayer. On the other, men drag a Jewish merchant toward a pyre, shouting accusations. In between flagellants, march past blood dripping from their whips. It is a grotesque carnival of devotion, violence, and spectacle. Each act claims to honor God, yet together they paint a picture of chaos. As night falls, you return home unsettled. You light a candle, whispering prayers, half out of faith, half out of habit. Outside, chants echo mingled with screams. You realize that religion here is not simply belief, it is survival, politics, entertainment, and weapon all at once. God has never felt closer and never farther away. By now, the line between faith and fear has blurred into something unrecognizable. You walk through a city where churches overflow 1 hour and mobs erupt the next. Bells toll for prayer and for pogroms, sometimes in the same afternoon. The air itself feels split, half incense, half smoke, from burning homes. Inside cathedrals, people kneel shoulder to shoulder, whispering prayers through cloths soaked in vinegar. The glow of candles warms their faces, but their eyes dart nervously, as if searching for signs of sickness, even in the house of God. Priests move quickly, blessing, sprinkling, chanting. Their voices echo through stone arches, hollow, trembling. Some still believe salvation lies here. Others attend simply because it is something to do when the world outside feels unbearable. Outside those walls, trust collapses. Neighbors accuse neighbors. Old debts are settled with accusations of sorcery or heresy. Fear becomes a weapon sharper than any sword. In Strasbourg, debtors cheered as their Jewish creditors were slaughtered, faith mixing with financial relief in the ugliest of unions. The plague kills indiscriminately, but society does not. Humans, and yet devotion does not vanish. It mutates. Some people join pilgrimages, wandering from shrine to shrine in search of holy protection. Others turn to saints, crafting amulets and prayers specific to plague. Saint Sebastian, pierced by arrows, becomes the patron of survival. Arrows and pestilence seem alike swift, invisible, deadly. Images of him multiply, painted on church walls, carved into wood, carried in pockets. Faith narrows into symbols, tokens of hope, held tight egg. You notice how faith becomes almost physical. People wear it on their bodies, crosses hung on necks, herbs tied to belts, scars of flagellant whips on their backs. Religion here is not quiet reflection, but performance lived out in streets, in wounds, in rituals. Whether it saves or not is almost beside the point. What matters is the act itself, the rhythm of devotion beating back silence. But the church cannot ignore the cracks. Authority falters when priests flee, when flagellants steal crowds, when scapegoats burn, respect erodes. Scholars whisper that the old order may never recover, and indeed, out of this chaos, new ideas will one day bloom the questioning spirit of the Renaissance, the seeds of reformation. But for now, the ground is only fractured, trembling beneath desperate feet. As dusk falls, you pass a procession by torchlight. The flames lick upward shadows dancing across stone. Some chant psalms, others curse their enemies, still others march in silence. The mix is strange, contradictory, unsettling, and yet it feels like the truest picture of the age, faith, and fear marching hand in hand. You close your eyes and breathe the smoke, sharp and acrid. Tomorrow the bells will toll again. Tomorrow the processions will return. Tomorrow someone will pray, someone will blame, someone will bleed. And as you retreat into the night, you sense that the greatest danger is no longer just the plague itself. It is the way people respond to it, how faith twisted by fear can bind communities together or tear them savagely apart. The plague is not your only enemy. You step into the street at dawn and realize danger has multiplied, crawling into every shadow. The city that once hummed with order now bristles with suspicion, violence, and greed. Death may stalk in silence, but humans bring chaos with noise. You pass a row of houses, abandoned overnight. Doors swing open, shutters bang in the wind. Neighbors whisper that the family fled into the countryside, hoping fresh air might spare them. Others mutter darker rumors that they carried sickness with them, spreading it from village to village. Fleeing may save you, or it may mark you as a walking curse. Trust has dissolved. Everyone sees strangers as contagion wrapped in human skin. Thieves roam more boldly than ever. Once they picked pockets in markets. Now they strip corpses of rings, tear cloaks from the dying, pry coins from clenched fists. You glimpse one bending over a body in the alley, tugging at boots stiff with blood. He looks up briefly, eyes flat, then shrugs as if to say, "Better me than the rats." In plague time, morality has the half-life of bread, left on a shelf gone by morning. Even the living are treated like loot. Homes of the dead are plundered, their goods claimed by whoever steps in first. Silver goblets, wooden bowls, even mattresses crawling with fleas. Everything becomes spoils. In Florence, Boccaccio noted how abandoned houses became common property, seized by any stranger bold enough to enter. Imagine Airbnb, except the check-in key is a plague cart, and the last guest died in the bed. Rumors sharpen into weapons. A cough in the wrong moment brands you dangerous. A whisper that you looked too healthy makes you suspicious. Why aren't you sick like the rest? Perhaps you struck a deal with the devil, or worse, poisoned your neighbors. Fear turns quickly to fury. In some towns, mobs attack healers, convinced their medicines spread the plague. In others, foreigners are slaughtered for carrying strange airs. Survival is no longer about health alone. It's about avoiding the wrong glance at the wrong time. The countryside offers no safer refuge. Bandits thrive on empty roads, ambushing travelers fleeing towns. Pilgrims, hoping for holy protection, often find only sharp blades and stolen packs. Farms lie deserted, fields untended, but danger still prowls. Wolves creep closer, their howls echoing across hills once crowded with shepherds. With fewer men to hunt them, wild animals reclaim what humans abandoned. The night feels fuller teeth, glittering just beyond the firelight. Inside cities, law unravels. Courts close, sheriffs vanish, guards desert. Some lords flee to their country estates, leaving peasants defenseless. Others clamp down brutally, executing anyone who defies quarantine or disobeys curfews. You hear of towns where corpses pile in squares, not from plague, but from hangings. Fear turns rulers into executioners, convinced death can be managed by decree. But no edict stops fleas. Religion too feeds the danger. Flagellant processions sometimes erupt into riots, their fervor boiling over into violence. Pogroms against Jews continue, fueled by sermons, twisted into rage. You think of Strasbourg, where 2,000 were burned in one day, while priests looked on. The plague kills, but humans add their own brutality, as if competing for death's attention. Even food becomes perilous. Bread is hoarded, wine-watered grains stolen. People fight over scraps in markets, their desperation spilling into bloodshed. Merchants inflate prices shamelessly. A crust of bread costs a week's wage, and those who cannot pay starve or steal. Hunger makes daggers sharper than any smith could forge. You return home as dusk falls, doors barred, heart racing. Outside the city growls with menace. Danger lurks not only in fleas and fevers, but in neighbors' suspicion, in thieves' knives, in mobs' fury. You realize survival is no longer just about avoiding sickness. It is about moving carefully through a world where every shadow, every stranger, every silence might kill you. The city by daylight looks less like a community and more like a battlefield without soldiers. The plague may be invisible, but danger wears many visible faces. You walk cautiously, every corner is a gamble. The quiet is broken not by merchants or children, but by the clash of desperation. On one street, a group of men argue over a barrel of grain. Voices rise, hands reach, knives flash. By the time you pass, one man lies bleeding. The others scatter with sacks slung over their shoulders. Hunger has stripped away civility faster than any sermon could restore it. Once disputes might have been settled in courts. Now the courts are empty. The judges gone, the law no stronger than the arm holding the sharpest blade. You hear stories of entire neighborhoods barricading themselves. Families drag furniture against doors, nail shutters, closed. Post guards with makeshift weapons. They fear not only the plague, but the living who covet what little remains inside. Food, blankets, even vinegar-soaked cloths. Anything can spark violence. The plague turns survival into siege. Beyond the city roads, swarm with danger too. Bandits watch for wagons creaking under supplies. Pilgrims stumbling toward shrines, or desperate families fleeing to the countryside. Wolves prowl closer, their howls echoing across empty fields. Once kept at bay by shepherds, now they reclaim land with tooth and claw. Travelers whisper of seeing glowing eyes in the tree line, waiting for weakness. When men flee, nature steps in to claim their ground. In England, King Edward V issued the Statute of Laborers in 1304, trying to freeze wages at pre-plague levels. But paper edicts mean little when desperation fills streets. Men abandon fields, chasing better pay elsewhere. Lords fume, but their peasants slip away by night. For once, the powerless realize the powerful cannot hold them. Ironically, the most dangerous thing to the old order is not knives or plague, it's a farmer deciding to work for someone else. The first Union Strike Plague edition Even religion feeds the risk. Flagellant groups once welcomed begin to unsettle towns. Their bloody processions attract crowds, yes, but they also attract unrest. In some places, they demand donations, food, or shelter. Refuse, and their chants turn into curses. What was penance becomes extortion, faith weaponized into fear. If Yelp existed, their reviews would read 2 stars crowd control, pour too much blood on the cobbles. Rumors of witchcraft slither everywhere. Women who gather herbs are accused of curses. Midwives, healers, even widows with strong wills become suspects. You hear of trials where the evidence is nothing more than a withered cow or a suspicious glance. Torture rings, confessions, mobs cheer, and the accused are dragged to pyres. The plague does not just kill bodies, it warps minds, convincing people that burning neighbors might save them. Inside homes, danger grows quieter but sharper. Suspicion eats families alive. A son coughs, and his father eyes him with fear. A wife trembles, wondering if her husband's touch will sicken her. Bonds unravel under the weight of paranoia. Some households lock their sick in rooms, sliding food beneath doors, waiting for silence to return. Kindness becomes deadly, and love itself feels like risk. At night, you hear more than coughing. You hear shouting, crashing doors, splintering. Gangs break into homes, stripping them bare. A neighbor's scream rises, then cuts short. You press your back to your own door, praying it holds. In the dark, danger feels multiplied, plague in the air, knives in the street, fear in your chest. Sleep is shallow, your ears tuned for the scrape of footsteps. Even daylight offers no relief. On one square, you see bodies hanging from gallows. Officials insist they were thieves punished to restore order. But you suspect the truth. Fear makes rulers lash out, hoping terror will replace law. Yet the gallows solve nothing. For every thief swinging, 2 more slip through alleys, hungrier and bolder. The most chilling part is the randomness. You cannot predict what will kill you first. A flea, a mob, a bandit, a rumor, even a loaf of bread might hold poison if handled by the wrong hands. Safety feels like a fairy tale, distant and unreal. Each step you take feels like balancing on a crumbling wall, danger yawning on either side, and yet you keep walking. You learn to blend into shadows, to move quietly, to lower your eyes at the wrong moments. Survival now means more than avoiding sickness. It means playing invisible in a world where every glance, every cough, every coin could make you a target. By now, you realize the plague's deadliest weapon isn't always the flea or the cough, it's suspicion. Trust, once the invisible glue of communities has evaporated like morning mist. What remains is fear, sharp and jagged, cutting even the closest bonds. You pass a well where neighbors argue. One swears the water tastes strange. Another insists a Jew was seen nearby. Voices rise, fingers point, and before long the debate becomes accusation. Within hours, torches are lit, and a family is dragged into the street. No proof, no trial, only rumor. You watch sickened as fear transforms into fury. It spreads faster than plague, devouring reason. If social media had existed, it would have been the original fake news campaign, likes, shares, and lynchings, all in real time. The witch hunts begin the same way. A woman gathering herbs, a midwife delivering stillborn children, a widow surviving when others perish, all become suspicious. You hear of trials where evidence amounts to nothing more than a neighbor's cough or a dying man's delirious words. Torture ensures confession because pain makes truth irrelevant. The accused whisper anything to end the agony. Some are hanged, others burn their cries, joining the plague's soundtrack of bells and groans. You wonder grimly which is worse, dying by disease or by your neighbor's fear. Inside households, paranoia gnaws like rats at grain sacks. A child sneezes and the mother recoils. A husband coughs and the wife locks the bedroom door. Families fracture under suspicion. Chroniclers describe fathers abandoning sons' wives, fleeing husbands, siblings barring siblings from their homes. Compassion, once praised, now feels reckless. Love itself is rebranded as a hazard. If Hallmark cards had existed, they'd read I love you, but please stay 6 feet away. Even the healthy are not safe. Survivors who look too well attract envy and suspicion. How did they avoid sickness? Did they consort with devils? Did they profit from the dead? One man's fortune becomes another man's evidence. In Mainz, entire households were accused of sorcery simply because they lived when neighbors perished. Survival itself is criminalized. The authorities, desperate to reassert control, double down on harshness. Quarantines become prisons guards stationed at city gates. Anyone breaking curfew risks the noose. In Milan, some houses are bricked shut, sick and healthy, sealed together. It spares the city greater losses, but for those inside, it is a living tomb. You picture it, walls rising sunlight, fading air thickening. Perhaps the plague will not take you, but the stone will. And then there are the mobs. Anger seeks targets, and when none can be found, it invents them. Foreigners, beggars, even physicians are chased through streets. You hear of doctors beaten for failing to cure patients as though their impotence were malice. You imagine trying to explain, I prescribed figs and bloodletting. What more do you want? Not exactly malpractice insurance. The fear of contagion twists even funerals. Families abandon corpses at church doors, afraid to dig graves themselves. Priests hesitate to touch the dead, leaving bodies to pile. Strangers, hired to bury them, often strip valuables first. Grief curdles into resentment against neighbors, against clergy, against God. Every ritual that once bound communities together now feels poisoned. Even laughter becomes dangerous. Revelers in taverns draw suspicion. How dare they enjoy life when others die? Some are accused of mocking God, their joy twisted into evidence of guilt. In Florence, Boccaccio noted that pleasure seekers drank and sang until death claimed them mid-toast. For onlookers, their collapse was proof of divine punishment. Joy itself was criminalized. The world reduced to misery as the only safe expression. As night falls, the city transforms into something almost unrecognizable. Doors barred, whispers, thick eyes, darting from window cracks. Danger prowls not only in shadows, but in the minds of those still living. A rumor, a glance, a cough, any spark can ignite violence. You press deeper into your cloak, heart pounding. Survival means not just avoiding the sick, but avoiding suspicion. And so you tread lightly, silent as a shadow, praying that tonight no one whispers your name. By now you understand the plague is not the only predator. It shares the city with hunger, with fear, with neighbors who sharpen suspicion into knives. And in some ways, those dangers cut deeper. A flea does not accuse you. A cough does not light a torch. Only people do that. You walk past a row of houses at dusk. Their doors stand open, their rooms stripped bare, not by the plague, but by looters. Candlesticks, gone bedding stolen, even straw mattresses, hauled into the night. What remains are the marks of violence. Splintered doors, overturned stools, a smear of blood on the wall. Whoever lived here may have survived the sickness, but not their fellow men. The city guard, once the face of order, has thinned to shadows. Some deserted, others joined the very gangs they were meant to fight. Justice no longer wears a badge. It wears whatever weapon is at hand: a kitchen knife, a farmer's scythe, a stone pulled from the street. The world is improvising law, and its rulings are swift and brutal. Beyond the walls, the countryside simmers too. Villages turn on outsiders refusing entry, burning bridges, closing wells. Farmers armed with pitchforks stand watch at crossroads, barring strangers. Hospitality, once a point of pride, is replaced by hostility. Every visitor is a threat, every traveler a vector. Even kindness is rationed, parceled out only where bloodlines demand it. And yet the danger that lingers most is suspicion. You feel it in every glance, every silence when you walk past. It coils in the air, heavier than incense that sticks closer than fleas. Suspicion whispers, "Why are you alive when others are not?" Suspicion wonders, "What did you do to deserve survival?" It is a toxin as corrosive as the plague itself, and it spreads with terrifying ease. As the bells toll, once more, you stop in the street and realize people now fear each other more than they fear the disease. A neighbor's rumor can kill faster than a cough. A mob's scorch burns brighter than fever. The plague devours bodies, but people devour trust, and without trust, a city cannot live. The night deepens. You return home, bolt the door, and sit in darkness. Outside, footsteps echo. A cart rattles, a shout flares, then dies. You clutch your cloak tighter, listening. Rats scratch on the walls, fleas stir in straw, but it is not them that keep you awake. It is the knowledge that the most dangerous predator walks on two legs, breathes the same air, and may be standing outside your door. And with that thought, you prepare for another night. Survival is not guaranteed. Safety is not real. In the plague years, danger never sleeps. Night falls differently now. Once the city glowed with lanterns, laughter spilling from taverns, families huddled together by firelight. Tonight, the streets lie hushed shadows, stretching long, punctuated only by the toll of bells. You step outside briefly, and the air feels heavier at dusk, as if darkness itself carries contagion. The silence is not peace. It is anticipation, the quiet of lungs, holding a collective breath. You return home and bolt the door. The straw mattress awaits lumpy and crawling with unseen guests, fleas that may carry death with every bite. You lie down anyway, because exhaustion is stronger than fear. The straw pricks your skin, the smell of sweat and vinegar clings to the air, and you shift uneasily. Sleep has become less about rest, more about bargaining. Each night feels like a coin flip. Will you wake again? The sounds of the city do not fade when darkness deepens. They sharpen. A cough rattles through the wall from your neighbor's house, followed by groans that rise and fall like waves. Somewhere farther away, a scream cuts through the night, sudden and raw, then silenced too quickly. You flinch at the sound of feet running past your door, whispers thick with urgency. Were they carrying a sick child to the ditch? Or fleeing a mob? You'll never know. Plague nights are stories without endings, cut short by silence. You pull the blanket higher, though it does little against the chill. Cold air seeps in through cracks, bringing with it the sharp tang of smoke. Somewhere another bonfire burns, meant to cleanse the air, though all it does is choke the stars. You cough into the blanket, hoping the sound will not carry. Every cough feels incriminating, every sneeze an accusation. Imagine living in a world where your lungs betray you louder than gossip. Not all noises frighten, some comfort, though faintly. The murmur of prayers drifts from nearby homes. Latin chants whispered, psalms, desperate invocations. You close your eyes and imagine the city as a vast choir, each voice fragile, trembling, yet woven together in the dark. Perhaps God listens, or perhaps the sound is only for the living, a lullaby against despair. You think of those who have no homes to bar themselves inside, the dying left in streets, wrapped in cloaks, breathing their last beneath the stars. Some crawl to churchyards, hoping proximity to holy ground will bring salvation. Others collapse where they stand, found stiff by morning. Sleep for them is no different from death. It is only the timing that changes. Inside your home, the rituals of bedtime persist, though altered. You hang garlic near the bed, sprinkle vinegar on the floor, whisper prayers as you lie down. Each act is both faith and superstition armor against the unseen. Does it help? Perhaps not, but it gives shape to the fear, turns it into steps you can follow. Rituals soothe, even when powerless. Your body aches for rest, but your mind rebels. Thoughts churn. Was that bite on your ankle a flea? Is the ache in your head from hunger or fever? You roll over restless, every sensation amplified. The blanket scratches, the straw rustles the air, tastes faintly of ash. You long for sleep, yet dread it too. For in this age, closing your eyes feels like surrendering control, and then somehow exhaustion wins. Your breath slows, your muscles slacken, and the noises of the city blur into a distant hum. Sleep arrives, not like a gentle friend, but like a thief, sudden, uninvited, overwhelming. And as you drift, one thought lingers in the time of the Black Death. Waking is never guaranteed. The hours after midnight feel longer than the day itself. Darkness stretches heavy and endless, broken only by sounds that remind you the city never really sleeps. A cart creaks somewhere, its wooden wheels protesting. You imagine the driver hauling bodies even under the moonlight, because death does not pause when the sun sets. The thought makes you shiver under your blanket. In this age, even the graveyard shift means exactly what it says. Your body tosses restless on the straw mattress. Every itch feels suspicious. Was that the tickle of a flea? You scratch until your skin reddens, then stop, suddenly horrified at the thought of opening a wound. Infection doesn't need invitations, only opportunities. The paranoia gnaws at you as much as the insects. Sleep in plague time is never pure. It is an uneasy truce between exhaustion and fear. The air inside the room is stale. You try to breathe shallowly, convinced that deep breaths might draw contagion deeper into your lungs. Some neighbors burn herbs through the night, rosemary, juniper, wormwood. Their smoke seeps through walls, mixing with the vinegar-soaked rags hanging by your window. The scent is cloying, acrid, almost sweet. You wonder if you are inhaling protection or poison. Either way you cough, either way you pray. Outside voices rise briefly in song. A group of revelers, drunk on cheap ale, weave through the streets. Cups raised laughter sharp. Their chorus slurs into chants, then dissolves into coughing. You shake your head in the dark. They believe merriment can outshout the plague. You admire their spirit, but you know the truth. Joy is no shield. Still, for a moment, their voices lift the silence, a ragged lullaby reminding you that life, however fragile, still flickers. Then quieter footsteps pass, flagellants, marching even at night. Their chants are low, punctuated by the wet crack of whips on flesh. You hear the rhythm lash chant. The sound makes your skin crawl, yet also lulls you in its strange monotony, pain as prayer rhythm, as salvation. If Spotify playlists existed, this one would be called Top Hits of the Apocalypse Blood Edition. You close your eyes, trying to drown it all out, but your mind drifts to stories of Milan, where entire houses were bricked shut with the sick inside, of Venice, where plague barges ferried bodies down canals by torchlight, of Avignon, where Pope Clement consecrated a river so corpses could be thrown into it without sin. These images swirl dark and surreal, blending with your dreams. Sleep and nightmare blur until you cannot tell one from the other. Your stomach growls, reminding you of hunger. Even at night, appetite does not rest. You chew on a crust saved from supper, its edges sharp enough to scrape your gums. The taste is stale, sour, but grounding. Food in the dark feels like proof you are still among the living. You swallow sip from a cup of watered wine and settle back down. For a moment, you almost believe sleep will be kind, but the city does not let you rest. Somewhere, dogs bark their voices frantic. A scream follows short, sharp cutoff too soon. You freeze, heart hammering, every sense straining. Silence returns heavier than before. You pull the blanket over your head, whispering prayers into the fabric. Sleep is fragile in these hours, shattered by every sound, and yet exhaustion presses harder. Your eyes close despite fear. Your breath evens out, shallow but steady. Dreams creep in again, strange and fevered markets full of skeletons. Churches overflowing with candles that never burn out, oceans of rats carrying ships instead of sailors. The plague does not release you even in sleep. It simply shifts into visions. Still, you surrender. Because what choice is there? Morning may not come, but night cannot be fought forever. In the time of the Black Death, falling asleep is both an escape and a risk. And as you drift again into uneasy dreams, you realize that every dawn is less a promise, more a reprieve. You wake in the middle of the night, not because you want to, but because silence itself has become suspicious. The coughing next door has stopped. For a moment, relief flutters until you realize silence may mean death. You lie there, eyes wide, staring into darkness, wondering if your neighbors still breathe. The thin wall between you and them feels like the border between life and eternity. You roll over and glance at your family, huddled on straw mats beside you. Sleep does not soften their faces, it hardens them. Lines deepen, eyes twitch, lips mutter in dreams. You wonder if their shallow breaths will continue until morning. The thought twists inside you. Will you wake next to warmth or next to cold stillness. In the age of plague, going to bed together is no guarantee of rising together. Dreams offer no refuge. They come fevered, wild. You see processions of skeletons marching through streets, bells tolling not in sound, but in light. You dream of rats steering ships into harbor tales curling like ropes. You dream of endless fields where buboes sprout like flowers, blooming purple and black. You wake gasping, heart racing, your body slick with sweat. Nightmares and reality blur until you no longer know which is worse. In the distance, bells toll again, even at this hour. Death does not respect schedules. Every ring cuts into your half sleep, reminding you that someone else has slipped away. You try to count them like sheep, hoping the rhythm will soothe you. But the bells are not gentle. They are iron and final. Counting them only tightens the knot in your chest. Imagine falling asleep to Spotify's calm sleep playlist, except every track is just another one dead on loop. Your stomach churns, not from hunger, but from unease. You sip watered wine from a clay cup, the liquid sour on your tongue. For a moment, it grounds you. Then you wonder whose hands touched this cup before. Was it washed well? Was the water pure? Even midnight comfort carries suspicion. You set it aside, thirst burning, but fear heavier. Outside the city murmurs. A dog barks, then yelps, suddenly quiet. Footsteps scurry down an alley, followed by the low creak of a cart. You picture bodies loaded in the dark, hauled away before sunrise. Collectors work at night because daylight cannot keep pace. Their wheels squeal like a lullaby for the dying. You curl deeper into your blanket, wishing straw could muffle sound as well as it itches. Beside you, someone coughs softly. Your heart stops. You turn slowly and see your younger brother stir, pulling the blanket tighter. His eyes half open, glassy, then close again. Was it just a dream cough, or the beginning of something worse? You whisper a prayer under your breath, half plea, half bargaining. In plague time, every sound from a loved one is both reassurance and alarm. You think of Milan, where houses were bricked shut to contain sickness, families sealed alive the wall their tombstone. Do they sleep in such prisons? Do they lie awake counting breaths until air thins? The thought tightens your throat. Your own home feels suddenly smaller, the walls closer, the air thicker. You shift restlessly, searching for space that does not exist, and yet exhaustion pulls again. You drift through uneasily. In dream, you see priests with beaked masks standing at your bedside, herbs smoking in their hands. They whisper in Latin, their voices merging with the creak of cartwheels. You reach out, but your heads pass through them, smoke and shadow. You fall deeper, uncertain if this is sleep or the edge of death. Still morning sometimes comes. Survivors wake, stretch, blink at the pale light slipping through shutters. Relief floods briefly as if one night conquered the plague. But then the coughing begins anew. The bells toll again, and the cycle resumes. Going to bed in plague time is not rest, it is rehearsal. Each night you practice dying, and each morning you rehearse being surprised you survived. The final hours of night feel endless. You lie in the dark, tracing every creak of the beams, every shuffle of straw beneath restless bodies. Time moves strangely now. Minutes stretch like hours, while hours vanish in a blink. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and fragile, breaking at the faintest sound. You think of how people once ended their days. Families gathered by far children, lulled with stories, couples whispering prayers of gratitude. Now, bedtime is a negotiation with fear. Parents whisper not blessings, but warnings. Don't cough, don't touch, don't breathe too deep. Children close their eyes too tightly, hoping dreams will hold them until dawn. The rituals of peace have turned into rituals of survival. Some households refuse to sleep at all. Neighbors speak of families keeping vigil through the night, candles burning until wax runs down. Convinced wakefulness is protection, as if death only comes when invited by dreams. Others try the opposite, drinking heavily before bed, collapsing into oblivion. If tomorrow is uncertain, why not skip the anxiety? In taverns, men toast to waking again. The irony is cruel. Some die before the ale even leaves their throats. The city outside mirrors this unease. Bonfires smolder in squares, smoke drifting through alleys. Some fires are meant to cleanse the air, others to ward off wolves or thieves. Their glow casts long shadows across stone, flickering on shuttered windows. From a distance, the city looks alive, dotted with embers. Up close, it feels haunted, as if each flame marks another home in mourning. And yet morning always comes, though never guaranteed. When the first gray light seeps through cracks, you blink in disbelief. Another night survived. Relief floods your chest, but it is short-lived. A neighbor's cry rises. Someone has not woken. The joy of survival is always paired with the grief of loss. You stretch your limbs carefully, as though testing whether you still belong to the living. Every joint, every breath feels like a quiet victory. You rise, splash vinegar on your face, chew stale bread. The day resumes, as if nothing happened, though everything has changed. Because each night the city rehearses the end of the world, and each dawn it wakes into an apocalypse that has simply chosen to continue instead of conclude. Lying down in plague time is never just about rest. It is an act of courage, of surrender, of defiance. Sleep becomes the nightly gamble. You may wake, you may not. And as you fold your blanket, you realize every morning light is borrowed. Every dream survived is grace. Now the bells toll again, and you step into a world that feels no safer in daylight. But for one more night, you made it through, and that is the closest thing to peace you will find. Closing summary. And so our long journey through the Black Death draws to its quiet end. You've walked the silent streets at dawn, hungry in markets stripped bare, seen work vanish into stillness, and felt the sickness itself creep into every breath. You've prayed with the desperate, marched beside the fearful, and learned that danger came not only from fleas and fever, but from neighbors' whispers, mobs' torches, and suspicion sharper than any dagger. At last you lay down in the dark, uncertain whether morning would arrive yet. Somehow dawn always returned, pale and trembling, carrying you into another day. The Black Death ravaged Europe, yes, but it also remade it. Fields lay empty, but from their silence came change. Laborers demanded more. The feudal order cracked, and faith itself was questioned. Out of plague grew new art, new thought, and in time, the Renaissance bloomed. Even in ruin, seeds of renewal waited. History's cruelest lesson is also its most comforting. Humanity endures, even when endurance feels impossible. As you drift now into your own sleep, let this story settle softly. The world has faced darkness before and still found its way back to light. Your worries tonight may feel heavy, but tomorrow's dawn will come just as it always has. Close your eyes, let the bells of the past fade, and carry with you the quiet truth that even in plague years, people dreamed, loved, and survived. Sweet dreams, and may your morning always arrive.